Best action movie, and next to me right now, the winner, Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson has always been more than just a Hollywood actor. The world had made up its mind about him a long time ago. Some saw a hero, others a fallen star. But that day, when he finally opened his mouth to speak, everything changed. For years, he lived in the spotlight, praised for his talent and admired for his bold storytelling. Behind the fame, something darker was happening. There was a day no one ever talks about, a moment that changed everything. Why did Mel vanish from the spotlight for so long? And what was so shocking that no one wanted the public to see it? Stay with us as we uncover the story that was buried for years. The man they couldn't control. Before Mel Gibson became a household name known for both his talent and controversies, he was an ordinary boy growing up in Australia, far away from the flashing cameras and roaring crowds. His early life was shaped by quiet moments and the strong influence of his family's beliefs. When Mel was 12, his family made a big move from the United States to Australia. But that wasn't a random decision. It was driven by his father's deep distrust of the direction America was heading. Hutton Gibson was a man who questioned everything, who believed that the world was moving toward chaos, and he wanted to shield his family from that future. Those ideas did not disappear once they crossed the ocean. Instead, they became part of Mel Gibson's foundation. Growing up in this environment, Mel learned to observe more than speak. He rarely sought attention, preferring to watch and understand the people around him. Acting wasn't something he planned for. It was simply a way to earn money after finishing school. But once he stepped onto the stage, everything changed. Mel wasn't interested in shallow performances or empty applause. Instead, he sought out the hidden emotions beneath each character, like the pain, the anger, the fear. And he brought those feelings to life in a way that made people take notice. His presence was powerful, almost unsettling to those who met him. Casting directors could sense it too, which is why his auditions never went unnoticed. Then came Mad Max, a small film made with little money and even fewer expectations. Shot in the harsh Australian outback, it could have been forgotten like many low-budget movies. But when Mel was in front of the camera, something extraordinary happened. He transformed into a wild, unpredictable force that captured the raw energy of a world on the edge of collapse. Audiences were captivated, and Hollywood quickly took notice. Suddenly, the quiet boy from down under was thrust into the spotlight as a rising star. As his career blossomed with films like Gallipoli and The Bounty, and especially with the explosive success of Lethal Weapon, Mel's charm and talent made him one of the most bankable actors of his generation. Yet behind his smile and swagger, there was a shadow. While others enjoyed the glitz and glamour, Mel seemed distant, almost wary. He was watching the industry closely, questioning why the stories being told were so carefully controlled, why certain voices were heard while others were silenced. This growing dissatisfaction led him to want to take control of his own narrative.
We have some exciting news to share with you about the sequel of Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ.
To tell stories that no one else dared to tell, his determination culminated in The Passion of the Christ. When studios rejected his vision as too risky, too controversial, and too raw, Mel refused to give up. Instead, he poured his own money into the project, risking everything he had earned. When Mel Gibson first spoke about making The Passion of the Christ, most people didn't take him seriously. It wasn't just the subject matter that raised eyebrows, it was how he planned to tell it. He wanted to use ancient languages, Aramaic and Latin, with no modern English at all. He wanted to film the final 12 hours of Jesus' life in all its raw, bloody detail. He didn't want polished dialogues or dramatic music to soften the blows. Instead, he wanted viewers to feel the weight of each moment, to sit with the suffering, to face the brutality, and to walk away changed. At the time, no studio wanted to fund it. Executives said it wouldn't sell. Some warned him that it would damage his career. Others accused him of pushing a religious agenda. But Mel Gibson had already made up his mind. He believed this was a story that needed to be told in the way it happened, not filtered through decades of safe storytelling, but shone with all its pain and power. The day everything changed. It was supposed to be just another day on set. They were filming the most difficult part of the movie, which was the crucifixion. Everyone was tired as they had been through weeks of tough work, and this scene was the most emotional one. Jim Caviezel, the actor playing Jesus, was up on the wooden cross. He had makeup all over his body to make it look like he had been beaten. The weather was calm, and the crew was ready to begin. But on that day, something happened that no one expected. Something that Mel Gibson would later say shook him to his core. Without warning, the sky went dark. Not slowly like when the sun sets, but all of a sudden, like someone turned off the light. The wind stopped blowing. There were no birds, no noise. Everything felt still and cold. It was like the world had paused. Out of nowhere, a loud crack hit the air, and a bolt of lightning struck the hill they were filming on. The first strike didn't land far from the cross. Everyone jumped, and some screamed. The second hit closer, and this time it struck Jim directly, and he fell limp. The set went into chaos. They rushed to him, hearts pounding, afraid he was dead. But somehow, he was still breathing. Jim was shaken, burned, but alive. And the doctors on set couldn't explain how he survived. Jim later described the moment as surreal, saying he felt like something had passed through him. Mel stood off to the side, silent and watching. He knew what he had just seen. It wasn't just the weather nor an accident. Something had shifted, and he would later call that day a spiritual confrontation. Sadly, that moment wasn't caught on film. The cameras had been rolling, but the footage was mysteriously lost. No one knows how, since there were neither backups nor copies. Everything was gone, as if that moment had never happened. But everyone who was there remembers it vividly. After that day, Mel said things began to move faster. The energy on set changed. People became more sensitive and alert. Some claimed to see shadows moving in places no one had been standing. Others said they heard whispers during quiet scenes, whispers in languages they didn't understand. But the most unsettling moment came one night after filming. Mel was alone, reviewing footage late at night. Most of the team had gone home, and he was sitting in the editing room, eyes locked on the screen. Mel was watching the moment Jesus was nailed to the cross, a scene that had already been reviewed several times, but this time something was different. In the background, behind the actors, there was a faint figure. At first, he thought it was a crew member. Maybe someone had walked into the frame by mistake, but as he watched closer, he saw that the figure wasn't walking. It wasn't even moving. It was just standing there, cloaked in darkness, watching. No one on set that day had seen anything. No one else noticed it during the shoot. It had never shown up in earlier cuts, but it was there now. Mel paused the frame and zoomed in. The figure had no face and just a shape. It looked almost human, but not quite. And the strangest part? A few frames later, it vanished. Not walked out nor faded, just gone. He didn't show it to many people, only a few close friends. Some thought it was a camera glitch while others said it was a shadow. But deep down, Mel believed it was something else. It was proof that the story they were telling wasn't just history, but a spiritual territory, and they had stepped into something real. That night, Mel didn't sleep. He stayed up thinking, not about the film, not about the box office, but about what they had stirred up. The veil between the physical and the spiritual had thinned, and he wasn't sure if they had gone too far or just far enough to wake something that didn't want to be seen. The film that shook the world. Long before the cameras started rolling, Mel Gibson knew this film wouldn't be easy. It wasn't just about recreating historical events or choosing the right actors. This was something much more personal, more spiritual. It was a story he had carried in his heart for years. One thing is that he felt that the story didn't need to be told in the way Hollywood was used to. He didn't want a polished, easy version of the story. He wanted people to feel the weight of it, the betrayal, the pain, the silence, the final breath. To make that happen, Mel made a choice most directors wouldn't dare consider. He would fund it himself. No studio, no big-name backers, no safety net. He poured in over $30 million of his own money. That meant if it failed, he would lose everything. His reputation, his career, his fortune. But money wasn't the only thing he risked. The filming began in Italy. far from the Hollywood spotlight. The set was difficult, the weather was unpredictable, and the scenes being shot were physically and emotionally exhausting. It felt almost as if something didn't want the movie to be made. He also chose to film the entire movie in Aramaic and Latin, languages barely anyone spoke anymore. Subtitles would carry the story. That decision alone caused producers and distributors to walk away. Some said audiences wouldn't understand. Others said it would be too brutal, too raw. But Mel didn't budge. He wasn't trying to entertain. He was trying to reveal something. During the filming, strange things began to happen. Some called them coincidences. Others called them signs. Lightning struck the actor playing Jesus not once, but twice.
The Passion, well, was struck by lightning on the last shot of the movie.
A crew member suffered a serious injury on set. Another developed unexpected health issues. Many felt the weight of the story they were trying to tell begin to press down on them. Yet, despite the challenges, they pressed forward. Jim Caviezel, who played Jesus, suffered more than most. He was accidentally whipped during one of the scenes. He dislocated his shoulder while carrying the cross. He battled hypothermia and pneumonia. There were days he could barely speak from exhaustion and pain. But he kept going, not because he had to, but because he believed in what they were doing. Mel stayed close by, watching every moment unfold, sometimes with tears in his eyes. This wasn't just acting. It was something sacred, something spiritual, and everyone involved could feel it. He spent hours in the editing room, choosing every shot with care. He cut out anything that felt fake, anything that softened the message. What remained was something unlike any film before it, a raw, brutal, honest look at one of the most powerful moments in history. When it was done, he didn't know what would happen next. He knew people would talk. He knew some would hate it. But he didn't expect the wave that followed. But Mel pressed on. Day after day, the cast and crew pushed through, believing that what they were creating was bigger than all of them. There were no grand speeches or red carpet attitudes on that set. Just long, grueling hours and a quiet sense that they were making something that mattered. When the film was finally completed, Mel showed it to a few close circles. Reactions were immediate and intense. Some cried. Others walked out in silence. A few even criticized the film harshly, calling it too violent and too graphic. But Mel didn't flinch. He hadn't made it to entertain. He made it to tell a story that he believed had been stripped of its power. Then came the backlash. Before the movie even hit theaters, media outlets began attacking it. Headlines accused Mel of everything from historical inaccuracy to religious extremism. Debates flared up across television and newspapers. Some accused the film of anti-Semitism. Others claimed it would divide audiences. There were calls for boycotts, protests outside theaters, and endless articles trying to tear it apart. But the people showed up anyway. Some churches embraced it. Others distanced themselves. Critics called it violent. Religious leaders argued over its accuracy. Long lines wrapped around buildings. Tickets sold out weeks in advance. Viewers, regardless of their background, felt something deeper in that film than they were prepared for. Some saw it as a spiritual awakening. Others saw it as a mirror held up to human cruelty. Either way, no one left untouched. And still, through it all, Mel said very little. He let the film speak. He knew it would either open hearts or stir resistance, but that was never his focus. For him, the film was an offering, a way to share what he had discovered in the quiet corners of faith and suffering. A story that had lived in shadows for too long. But even with the power it carried, the world wasn't ready for what came next. A firestorm he didn't expect. The Passion of the Christ went on to earn over $600 million worldwide.
This film, released in 2004, took the world by storm, raking in over $600 million worldwide,
becoming one of the highest-grossing R-rated films in history. And yet, despite its success, Mel found himself further pushed out of Hollywood's inner circle. To many executives, He was no longer the charming action star or award-winning director. He had become a problem, someone who went off script, someone they couldn't control. Still, Mel never apologized for the film. In interviews, he made it clear that he wasn't interested in pleasing critics or chasing fame. He was chasing truth. And even if that meant losing favor in the industry, it was a price he was willing to pay. This wasn't just about a movie. This was about a man who saw something broken in the way the world told stories, especially the ones about faith, sacrifice, and salvation. The passion was his way of breaking through the noise, of putting something real and sacred in front of people who had forgotten what that looked like. And even now, years later, the shockwaves of that decision are still being felt. When The Passion of the Christ was released, it was supposed to be the moment that crowned Mel Gibson as one of the most daring storytellers in Hollywood. He had taken a huge risk. He had put his own money on the line, and the world responded with millions of dollars at the box office and conversations that rippled through churches, schools, and even politics. But behind the success, something else was happening. Mel wasn't basking in the spotlight. Instead of praise, he was facing a storm. Major studios that once welcomed him with open arms began to distance themselves. Awards committees that had once honored his work were now silent. The media shifted their focus, not on the power of the film, but on the man who made it. They began to dig. Old interviews were re-examined. Offhand comments were pulled out and stretched into headlines. Some accused him of having dangerous views. Others claimed he had an agenda. The controversy around the film didn't end when the credits rolled. If anything, it had only begun. And it wasn't just Hollywood that turned cold. Some of Mel's longtime friends in the industry stopped returning his calls. Directors who once said they admired his work quietly avoided public support. It was as if a line had been crossed, a line no one had told him existed. But why? For Mel, the answer was clear. He had touched something sacred, something uncomfortable. He hadn't watered down the story. He hadn't hidden the pain or the faith. He had shown it all, and that made people uneasy. In interviews, he spoke openly about it. He said he expected criticism. What he didn't expect was silence from the people who had once called him a genius. Then came the personal attacks. His name started showing up in late-night jokes. Tabloids ran stories about his past, twisting every detail for attention. Some called him a zealot, others said he was dangerous. And slowly, the doors began to close. In the years that followed, Mel's life would spiral. Not because of the film itself, but because the world wouldn't let it go. Every move he made, every word he spoke, was weighed against that one project. The line between the artist and the art began to blur, and Mel, who had once stood at the top of the industry, found himself watching from the outside. Still, he didn't regret making the film. Not for a second. He said it had changed him, not just as a filmmaker, but as a person. The process of telling that story, of diving deep into history and faith, had forced him to confront things he hadn't faced before. It wasn't just a movie. It was a mission. And even as the world turned its back, Mel held on. He spent more time with his family. He stepped away from the cameras. He returned to his faith in quiet ways. And while the public debated the film's message, he carried the weight of it alone. Not bitterly, not with resentment, but with the kind of resolve that can only come from knowing you've done something honest, even if the cost is high. Because The Passion of the Christ wasn't just a film that shocked the world. It was a turning point, a line in the sand. And for Mel Gibson, there was no going back. What do you think happened behind the scenes of The Passion of the Christ? Why were so many powerful voices desperate to keep it buried or discredited? Let us know in the comments section. We hope you enjoyed watching this video. Remember to like, share it, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.